Welcome to the STS-46 post-launch news conference. We have a couple of folks with us here to describe how things went in the firing room this morning. And they are, from your left, Brewster Shaw, Deputy Program Manager, Space Shuttle, and Bob Seek, KSC Launch Director, and we'll start off with Mr. Shaw. Brewster?
Well, let's see. Good morning. It still is. We came, we launched, and as soon as we're done here, we're going to leave. And actually, the evening since Bob and I came on duty at around 1 o'clock this morning, the day's gone just about like that. It was an extremely smooth countdown. We didn't work very many issues, and none of them were significant, and Bob will tell you all about those. We didn't have to worry about anything. There was nothing that we had to write any waivers for. The hardware was very good to us. As you can tell, the weather was very good to us, not only here, but we had good weather at the TAL site, Ben Guerir, and at Edwards for our AOA coverage or first day PLS coverage. And so it was really a piece of cake countdown, so to speak. We launched 48 seconds after we had planned to launch, and the reason that happened was because the computers are faster than the rest of us, and the computer got there first, and it asked a question, and the answer wasn't yes yet, so we had to tell it that it was okay, that the answer wasn't yes yet. But we did that and picked up the count, and off they went. It looked like a real good launch from where we were sitting in the Launch Control Center, and I assume it looked just as good to you all. Now, the crew is got 7 days of really interesting things ahead of them. After the experience here, after the last launch, we thought that we'd be smarter this time, and so we thought about something to say, but Suresh beat us to it because he was the first guy that I saw mention the world's largest yo-yo. So he took that line, and we can't use that one. The one we can use, though, is Tiger by the Tail, and I know that's what you all think those guys are going to have Monday afternoon when they reel out the tethered satellite. I think it'll really be a pussycat, and it'll do just what everybody thinks it's going to do. And we'll all have a lot of fun watching them, but it won't be nearly as exciting because everything's going to go so slowly that it'll be hard to tell anything's happening. But it'll be interesting, and the science we're going to get from this particular mission is really neat science, and we are going to learn something brand new that we've never done before by letting a satellite on a tether, and I think we're going to find that holds a promise of some potential paybacks and future uses of tethered satellites that we'll all look forward to, and it'll be very interesting to us. So it looks like a fun mission, and a week from today at a couple minutes after 8, I don't remember exactly the time, we hope to have Atlantis right back here out at the SLF. 8:05, thank you. And that's kind of how the day has gone so far. It's been a really great day, and look forward to a fun mission. Bob?
Well, I would echo that. We always enjoy smooth launch counts when three factors come together. One is that you have a well-prepared vehicle and support system that has been accomplished by a professional team of people that know what they're doing and take a lot of pride in their work, and they do it well. And we certainly had that this morning. The hardware was good to us. That's the second factor, both the flight and the ground. In fact, the only two things we fixed since yesterday was to replace a module in one of our computer consoles in the control room, and we replaced a wind vane at one of our wind sites out at the pad when an osprey attacked it. And nothing else we fixed. We had a few backup systems on the ground that we switched in and relied on in the count, but that's normally the way the hardware goes. And the third factor, of course, is the weather, and the weather was good to us and didn't even become a discussion item. So we're obviously pleased. The team that prepared Atlantis for its last mission and for the next year plus down the road is obviously pleased with this performance, and we're looking forward to watching the crew and the rest of the mission develop in about a week from now for the landing.
Okay, let's open up to questions, and please wait for the mic. Give your name and affiliation.
Jim Asker with Aviation Week. Brewster, what was the question that the computer had not gotten the answer to?
It was APU-3 fuel ISO valve talkback, or micro switch.
Let me just elaborate on that. Our ground launch sequencer looks for those APU pre-start conditions to be met about 20 seconds before we give the command to the crew to start the APUs, and that's one of the few manual things that still remain in the count. So when the computer looked for that at about 20 seconds before we give the manual command, the third valve switch hadn't been thrown yet, and the computer saw that, so it told us to stop and not give that command until we had the verification. And that's what we waited for and talked about to make sure that there was no fuzz on that, so to speak, and that's why we held before we picked up.
Tom Boyle, Tipton Conservative. Mr. Seek, you did have a little problem with Shang Diaz. Couldn't talk to you. You could talk to him. What came of that?
Well, early on there was the communication link between KSC, JSC, and the crew went down temporarily, and that was due to a switching action that was performed in Houston. But the backup systems worked through that, and we got that restored within minutes.
Thank you.
Beth.
Beth Dickey with Reuters. Just for those of us who don't speak rocket all the time, ISO valve talkback, what does that mean? Somebody on board didn't start the APUs on time, or was it something else?
No, it's a manual activity to open the fuel isolation valves between the hydrazine tanks and the APUs, and we do that as late as possible in the launch count. And we give the command to the crew to do that at about -6 minutes. And they open the valves, and they look for a verification on their panel that they're open, and our computers do the same thing. And the pilot does those functions. We look for them to be in the proper start configuration before they actually start the APUs, about 20 seconds before we give the verbal command for the pilot to do that. And they got there for APU number 3, which is the third one that he configures for his checklist. They were a couple seconds late.
And there's 3 or 4, as I recall, there are 3 or 4 switches per APU that get thrown in the pre-start.
Jim.
Jim Banky, Florida Today. Question for either of you. If Atlantis gets back here a week from today, what would be the schedule for getting it deserviced and sent back to Palmdale? And could you update where you're at for the next mission?
Well, we have agreed to have Atlantis in Palmdale by the mid-October time frame, and so it'll stay here until we need to ferry it out. And let's see, why don't you talk about the next flight?
Well, for Space Lab J, of course the lab is already installed in Endeavour, and they're doing the testing between the lab and the orbiter. It's still our goal to roll it out of the orbiter processing facility somewhere in the third week in August, and that leads us to a launch around the 11th of September. That's the current plan.
Holman.
Thank you. Omar Machuca from Cosmos 1270 in Orlando and Radio Marti, Voice of America. How difficult is to retrieve the satellite after being deployed, the tether satellite?
It's difficult is an unusual word, I think, to use in talking about retrieving the tethered satellite, because the system that brings the satellite back in is a mechanical system, a motor, a drum that winds up the tether, and it has some control laws in it that reel the tether in at particular rates depending upon how much of the tether remains and how far the satellite is away from the vehicle. And those control laws are designed to do that properly and allow for the damping of any dynamics or motion of the tether or satellite that may have developed during the time it was deployed. So if the folks who have predicted those dynamics, those motions, are right, then the system will work very well, and it'll pull the satellite in at a rate, and there are a couple of stop points where you stop and allow the dynamics time to settle down and damp out. If all those predictions are right, then the degree of difficulty is very low, because the system will do what it's designed to do, and the satellite will be pulled in and tucked away in the bay. However, if the dynamics are significantly different than the pre-flight predictions and the analysis say, then of course we'll have to react to that in real time. And there's no way of predicting what kind of difficulty that could get us into until we see what happens.
Gentleman in the front row here.
Anatol Johansen, Die Welt in Bonn, West Germany. For the release and the retrieval of the satellite, are you flying nose forward or for one of these both opportunities tail forward?
Let's see if I can remember. The deployment of the satellite is, I think, tail forward with the nose pitched down, because the orbital mechanics activity of the relative motion of the two bodies will take the satellite behind the orbiter. And then when the tether gets out and things get stable, they'll tend to become perpendicular to the surface of the Earth due to the gravity gradient forces. Then during the retrieval, when you reel it in, again, orbital mechanics will come into play, and the satellite will tend to move out, and so the vehicle then will be, I believe, nose first, and it'll be pitched down again. So you keep the orbiter always, the boom pointed at the satellite.
Do we have a question at the Goddard Space Flight Center?
Guess not.
Okay, they're doing the switch. Can I have a show of hands here from anybody else who might want to ask a question after we get back here? Okay, just so I know how to play.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear Goddard now?
Yes.
This is Goddard. Sorry for the audio problem. A.R. Hogan, the Reuters Plus newsroom. Mr. Seek, how much difference does a hassle-free countdown make in how smooth the flow of the processing, getting ready for the next flight is after the mission is over? I mean, in other words, does it save you several days' time in terms of having to go back and analyze problems and figure them out? And I have a couple of follow-ups.
Well, not really, because problems that occur in launch count, obviously you have to disposition them before you fly, and that's our process. And we didn't have anything here other than a few items on the ground that need to be fixed. So I mean, it's nice to put a smooth launch count in your hip pocket, but it's quickly forgotten, other than the items that you left on the ground that may need to be repaired or restored before you fly again. And this time there was obviously very little of that.
Okay, my other questions are, we didn't hear at Goddard any mention of DTO for the ET photography. Was that just omitted on this flight, and if so, why not, or did we just miss hearing that? And I have also one brief question for Mr. Young. Do you know if there's some extra interest from the European press in this mission, and can you give me some handle on how much extra press you have on hand because of the European angle this time, please? That's it from Goddard.
Well, we don't have the cameras on 104.
Yeah.
The answer about the ET DTO is 104 is not configured with the same cameras that 102, for example, is, and so we don't do the DTO that takes pictures right after separation.
On the foreign press numbers, there was very intense foreign interest in this mission, and we're still digesting the numbers, and I'll call the gentleman at Goddard as soon as we have crunched those, which will be in about 20 minutes from now. Back here at KSC for a couple more questions. Beth?
Beth Dickey with Reuters again. Just for the trivia mill, would this have been the first flight since return to flight that got off exactly on the mark? Or Brewster, there's some disagreement between us about whether your flight was right on time.
No, I think this would be the first one.
The beginning of the window,
I don't
first
think
day.
I don't
yeah.
think we've had the first second of the first window yet.
But we're working on it.
Yeah. We're getting closer.
Stefano?
Stefano Coledan for Aeronautica Difesa. Last night we were out near the launch pad and we saw a number of emergency vehicles, including a fire truck, rushing up to the launch pad. Do you have any explanation for that?
I don't.
No. We didn't have any emergencies at the pad.
What time of night was it?
8:30 or 9 p.m.?
Oh,
Stefano, I think we can give you an answer for that. See us over in the news center.
we were trying to sleep then.
Tom, did you have your hand up? This makes you the cleanup man.
Oh, thank you. Tom Boyle, Tipton Conservative. In case you would have an Edwards landing, would you bring the orbiter back here if it's supposed to go to Palmdale?
Absolutely. The safing, deservicing still has to be done here before the modification period.
That's a wrap. Thank you very much for coming.